Hi, I'm Stephanie Bennett, and this is my final project for Greek mythology. I'm covering the women of Mount Olympus. So, first, some quick background. Mount Olympus was the tallest mountain in Greece, and it's determined to be over about 200 million years old, and it's by the Aegean Sea. So, the myth that goes along with this is that there was an ancient battle between the Titans and the Olympians. Zeus being part of the Olympians, and his father being the Titans, Cronus. Um, so Zeus and his brothers Poseidon and Hades band together to go up against his father. His father had swallowed his other siblings, and Zeus had given him a herb to spit out the rest of his children or throw them up. And this was marked as the end of the battle, and the Olympians had won. They had sealed the Titans away in the underworld, and they had taken over the mountain. So many of the Olympians on Mount Olympus were still children to Cronus, such as Zeus and Hera and his other siblings, and many of the other people on Mount Olympus were children to Zeus and his many lovers. I chose to cover the topic of women because I think this is a very important theme in all mythology, as women seem to represent new beginnings and fertility and rebirth, and they just seem to be a very important and uplifting factor of Greek mythology, or any mythologies. So we're going to start with Hestia. So Hestia is the goddess of hearth, home, and family. She was the eldest daughter to the Titans Cronus and Rhea, but she is also considered the youngest at the same time. This is because when she was born, she was the first, but when swallowed, she was the first, so she came out last when she was spit out by her father, so this was considered a rebirth, and she was saved by her brother Zeus. So gods Apollo and Poseidon became suitors for her hand, and she refused, and she vowed to stay a virgin goddess forever. She was blessed by Zeus, and he bestowed upon her the honor of protecting the hearth. This was a high honor, and she was given the richest portion of the house because of it. So her symbol is the hearth, and it's fire. She's considered the chief of the goddesses because she teaches mankind to build houses. So part of her dwells in every single household. There is a hearth in every single household, as it is very important to cook and keep the household warm. Hestia and Hermes are often seen together and appear to be teachers and protectors of mankind's work. She's gifted with the richest portion of the house due to her work, and she has her share of honor among the gods. The hearth is so important because people would use these hearths in their homes so Hestia could look after them domestically, but they would also place them in the towns so the town could live harmoniously. When moving towns, people would actually bring the fire from their old town to their new town out of superstition, thinking it would bring um, good luck to them. To keep the hearth burning, Hestia would use the animal fat that was sacrificed by the humans to the gods to keep it burning. If this fire died, all the fires on earth would also die. So this is why it was so important to keep this connection between the Greeks and the gods through fire. So the Greeks would always burn a portion of their food to keep their fire lit as a sacrifice to Hestia. So next is Hera. Hera is the goddess of marriage and queen of gods. She was daughter to Cronus and Rhea. She's also brother or sister to brother Zeus. So she was also one of the children swallowed by Cronus, and she was spit out by the herb that he had swallowed when saved by her brother Zeus. Zeus was quite captivated by her beauty, and because of this reason and this reason alone, he decided to seduce her, which she was very resistant about for quite a while, but he decided to trick her by turning into a cuckoo bird, and that is how he seduced her. She was not quite happy. It was a very unhappy marriage. Um, she's one of the most worshipped gods with many temples. Married and pregnant women were most devoted to her. She's a protector of wives and motherhood. She had 4 children. One being born to her alone was Hephaestus. She was quite jealous that Zeus had Athena, such a golden child, by himself, so she wanted to prove that she could have her own child. but there was some complications. It was very clear that he was quite ugly. He was very imperfect for a god. So Hera had tossed him off of Mount Olympus. He later came back and presented his mother with a golden throne, and she sat upon it and soon realized that she was trapped to it when she tried to get up. So he said he would not release her until she had accepted him back to Mount Olympus. So she did so and was released. So jealous of her husband's many affairs and his mistresses, she punished the mistresses and their children. That many of the children were prosecuted by Hera, and this just started to build up wrath in Hera. She was very jealous by all the infidelity. She eventually rebelled against Zeus and failed, but was imprisoned until she swore loyalty to him again. Another great example of her wrath was after the Trojan prince Paris chose Aphrodite for the golden apple, deeming her the most beautiful goddess over Hera. Hera was very angry, and the Trojans were targeted by her. This caused the Trojan War, and she did everything she could to harm them during their war with the Greeks. Her symbols are the peacock and the cow. Also the pomegranate, as this represents fertility in women. So next is Artemis. Artemis was a daughter to Zeus and Leto. She was the goddess of the hunt in the wilderness. So Zeus and Leto had two children. It was they were twins. It was Artemis and Apollo. She was known to rule over many things, including hunting, the moon, virginity, childbirth in the wilderness, and wild animals. She's also known to be the protector of young girls up until the age of marriage. She's associated with childbirth because after her mother being thrown out of Mount Olympus due to Hera's jealous rage of Zeus's infidelity once again, she was forced to have her children alone. And since Artemis was the firstborn of the two, she assisted her mother in Apollo's birth, so she is now the goddess of childbirth. She's called the mistress of wild animals because, as she is known to hunt them down and kill them for game, she also vows to protect them, more specifically younger animals. So Artemis and her family were exiled by Hera out of jealousy of Zeus's disloyalty to her. So Artemis and her brother grew up in an unfamiliar land, and they had to learn to defend themselves. This is how she got so familiar with her bow and arrow. And eventually, when they were old enough, they seeked vengeance for their mother and went after everybody that turned her away and her family, and they eventually even killed the dragon that was after them and their mother. This greatly impressed Zeus, and they were once again in his favor despite Hera's rage, and welcomed back to Mount Olympus. Artemis spent the rest of her time protecting and hunting sacred animals with her bow in the wilderness. She was known to be fair, but also brutal. She punished a king for killing a sacred deer, and she said, doing so, you must sacrifice your daughter. He agreed, but instead of sacrificing his daughter, she replaced her with a sacred deer. Showing this shows that she is still the protector of young girls. She had a love interest named Orion. Now there's two stories on his demise. One being that he said to prove his love for Artemis that he would struck down every single animal there is. She was very frightened as she's a protector of many animals. She had to kill him by setting a wild scorpion on him, but to keep their love long lasting, she asked her father to make a constellation for him and the scorpion. Now the other story is that her brother warned her about him, and she refused to listen to him, and out of rage he challenged her, saying, I bet I can have better bow skills than you. And she agreed to this challenge, and he says, you are to hunt that figure out in the water. Now she set her bow on this figure not knowing what it was, and she proved her brother wrong, but not knowing that she had just killed the love of her life, Orion. Next is the goddess Aphrodite, one of the more well-known goddesses of Greek mythology. Aphrodite is the goddess of beauty and love. So sea foam origins. She has a quite interesting origin story. She was born from the sea foam that had been created after Cronus overthrew his father Uranus. He decided to sever his father's genitals to keep him from having any more children, and he tossed them into the sea, which created sea foam, from which she arose. She eventually was adopted by Zeus and was seen as a daughter to him and Hera and lived on Mount Olympus. With Hephaestus returning to go after Hera, he demanded Aphrodite's hand in marriage, which Zeus was forced to grant. Aphrodite, being the most beautiful goddess, was not too content with being binded to such an imperfect and ugly god, so she did not show much loyalty towards her marriage. She had many lovers, the most famous being Ares. They had a child together named Eros, who is also known as Cupid. Hephaestus heard of this infidelity and was very angry. He set a trap for them, and he caught them in a net while they were lovemaking and unveiled them to all the other gods, but to his surprise, he was mocked by the gods. She also fell for a mortal named Adonis. She considered Adonis her true love, but unfortunately, he was killed in a hunting accident. There's many stories depicting how this went down, but one of the most famous is that her lover, Ares, was very jealous of Adonis and knew that he liked to hunt, so he transformed himself into a wild boar that killed Adonis. Hera hated Aphrodite because she blamed her for Zeus falling for all these other women in his infidelity. And this competition was increased with the story of the golden apple. So the golden apple was to be awarded to the goddess who was considered the most beautiful, and Hera, being married to Zeus for being the most beautiful goddess in his eye, thought that this was for her. So there was a fight between Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite over who would be the most beautiful goddess. So Hermes went out and chose Trojan Prince Paris to choose who of the three would get the apple. She offered him the love from the most beautiful girl, Queen Helen of Sparta, so he had chose Aphrodite, and this just struck up rage between Hera and Aphrodite, and this is how the Trojan War broke out. But Aphrodite vowed to protect Paris in this Trojan War and his children and his wife. Finally, we're going to talk about goddess Athena. So Athena is the goddess of wisdom. Zeus was told a prophecy that he and his wife Metis would have a daughter and then a son who was stronger than his father. Fearing being overthrown like the fathers before him, he decided to swallow his pregnant wife. He began to have headaches, and he asked to have his head split open. From this split, Athena emerged from his forehead in a full set of armor. Athena then became Zeus's golden child. She was known for great bravery and stood by her father in warfare. She became a goddess of war strategy and was known to even hold her own against Ares, the god of war. Those who fought using intelligence were blessed by Athena. She swore to virginity and became an inspiration to both young girls and brave warriors. After rivalry with Poseidon over who should rule, Athena was chosen to rule over the city of Athens, built in her name. Poseidon, furious, went after one of her devout virgin worshippers, a young and beautiful Medusa. He had raped her in Athena's temple. Finding out about this, Athena was both horrified and disgusted. Athena cursed Medusa's beauty by giving her snakes for hair and a gaze that would turn anyone to stone. Although Medusa was to live a life as a beast, she still showed loyalty to Athena. She still worshipped Athena on her own practice. Seeing this, Athena felt guilty for her irreversible mistake and sent out a brave warrior, Perseus, to behead her out of an act of mercy. She then engraved Medusa's face into her shield to honor her. And then these are my sources, and thank you for listening.